It is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com, where you can sign up for our free newsletter. I noticed like last week we had over 150 of you signing up for the free newsletter. Please do that. You'll get archives of all of these shows, plus transcripts where you can read really the full detailed analysis of what people are talking about. And you get a transcript of the callers, my favorite part, for good, clean comedy fun. And I'm able to write some stuff that I simply cannot say on the radio under the current FCC, but I understand under Donald Trump there won't be an FCC. So let's see what that's going to look like come January, right? We're talking right now to Lenny Gallo. He's the author of Unstill. His essays and articles have been published in journals and trade magazine. He's a certified specialist in the treatment of OCD. That's obsessive compulsive disorder. It's not fair when I or anybody uses acronyms, you're supposed to know what that means, right? Trauma, anxiety disorders. Can you relate to this, especially now? And we're discussing his new book called Unstill. It's the ordeal of anxiety pills and an undiagnosed disorder about a condition he developed as a side effect of prescription medicines. And a full third of Americans take at least 2 of those a day. Many of them have right on their label that this can happen to you. It did happen to him. And because he's a clinician, he was able to write about it, almost self-diagnose. And now he is the gold standard for understanding what this is. Lenny Gallo, we were talking a little bit about you being a therapist. You start off your book, Unstill, in a very odd place, your butt.
Yes.
Can you tell us your decision for doing this?
Oh, I must have fought with all of my editors on this one. People like take it out of the book, keep it from the book. So basically, the book starts in my behind with a fungal infection, and what I wanted to kind of show, I wanted to show a lighter moment because the book can get very heavy. I wanted to start with something very light. But I also wanted to show that this wasn't just so much about the fungal infection, because unfortunately what happens with this disorder is you have to be conscious and cautious of every single medication you might take in the future. So when this fungal infection wasn't going away with just some like regular creams, and the thought that I might have to take a pill for something like this, it becomes more detrimental, because keep in mind, there's been all of these sort of brain changes that have happened in my brain because of this. And that affects the way I take all types of medication. And so pills that maybe once didn't give me a problem can now be problematic for me. And this is where we need more research. This is where we need more data. This is where we need more study on this kind of stuff. And that's the big reason why I wanted to talk about this. And I wrote this book is because I really want to advocate for more research, more study, more data on this. We do recognize these are official DSM diagnoses. So this is not like, pseudoscience. These are things that do exist. These are things that do happen to people, but because we don't understand them enough, because we don't understand their origins, their roots, all of the symptoms that can become because of this, we don't understand how these things sort of, how we can really help and treat these things. And today, the best thing is prevention.
Let me jump in for a second, because I feel an analogy coming. When you have an analogy coming, you got to let it out.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, terrible bad things can happen. So a lot of these medications, when you use them, they aggregate, very much like aspartic acid in Diet Coke. We're all familiar with the 3 molecules that create this fake sugar and how it can cause neurological problems. It can cause, in some, they believe it's attributed to even brain cancer, aspartic acid, phenylalanine, and methyl alcohol. And the side effect is it's sweet. Invented by the Nazis in World War II, a great way to wipe out your enemy over a cup of coffee. Here, sugar with that? Boom, lights out. You take that formula, you let Donald Rumsfeld, who's running GD Searle in the 1980s, soften it, and now you've got sweet and low, or some variation of that anyway. All that to say, these things aggregate and sort of stay in your system, much like people who are allergic to bee stings. That bee venom hangs in there, not active, but you get yet another bee sting, and all the previous bee stings activate, and it can be curtains for any of us. This is the same thing with some of these medications. Lenny Gallo, you're talking about having this. Let's understand what your symptoms were because I could see Mildred sitting there at 87 with her sensible hose on, those white shoes with the thick soles. And she's looking down at her feet and she's like, what are these symptoms? So what were your symptoms?
So, there's three distinct, I guess, movement disorders that I had, and they can look slightly different. The general term is sort of medication-induced movement disorders, but the big one that people are familiar with, which is tardive dyskinesia. Tardive dyskinesia is going to have a lot of sort of chewing motion. So if you think of like this constant sort of slow rhythmic chewing sort of motion, that's the most typical feature of it. Oftentimes people's hands will look like they're playing the piano, and they can't stop playing the piano. It's this very sort of slow rhythmic type of movement. um, the more torturous one in my mind, which was a symptom, akathisia, which is literally this inability to sit still. And the only way I can compare this to people is it's like you've drank 50 cups of coffee. I have not done cocaine, but I have heard it compared to being like on speed or cocaine, where your body literally just cannot sit still. All you want to do is sit down. All you want to do is sleep. All you want to do is just like sit in a chair, and you can't. Your body has this internal agitation, to want to move, to want to get up, to want to want to get up and just do everything. And so the closest comparison, probably even for people to be able to understand, is like restless leg syndrome, which is actually a form almost of akathisia. Um, and then the other big one was tics. So people tend to think of tics and Tourette's as, people sprouting out profanities all over the place. But tics can be things like, again, this sort of urge to move muscles. I also did have a dystonic reaction, which you had mentioned earlier, which is where your muscles actually contract and lock up. So in terms of like what people should look for with this stuff, if you're starting a medication, increasing your dose on a medication, or you're stopping a medication, like psychiatric medication, you really want to look for this internal agitation, anxiety, movements that are just really out of your control. But the big thing people will say almost always when this is first going on is, I started to feel extra anxious. And if you tell that to a doctor, they're going to say, oh, well, let's increase the meds. Let's up the medication. But that
we're talking now antidepressants and things.
Antidepressants, antipsychotics, benzodiazepines have been known to do this. I should say there are some stomach medications that have been linked to movement disorders. And there's even some heart medications and antibiotics that are also linked to movement disorders as well. So you really want to pay attention to the side effects. And that's the other reason I wanted to talk to you, is because I just want people to be much more aware of what they're putting in their body. People will I can't tell you how many times I have people taking medications, patients of mine, who I'm like, so what medications are you on? And they don't even know the names of these things. And I think as a society, we really need to weigh out the cost benefit analysis of, is it worth getting these potential side effects for this thing I'm trying to treat?
And uniquely, Lenny Gallo, and here you've written this book on Still, which is a beautiful, thick tome, and you're a wonderful storyteller. And this brings to light something that is forbidden for us to talk about. We just don't talk about this in American society. You just deal with your side effects, and you get yet another medication to deal with the twitching, and then a medication to deal with the side effect of that. And now you're on 5, 6, 7, 8 medications, and you're toast, and you have no idea why. Plus, we're the only country where, while you're watching Hulu or America's Got Talent, you've got somebody with a syndrome that you've never even heard of, and a beautiful commercial with blooming flowers and waterfalls and people playing tennis, doing all the things you're jealous and wish you could do. And if you take this, it's like politics. If I take this pill, I'm going to live that lifestyle, and I'm not going to have whatever that problem is that maybe I have or maybe don't have. It's insane. Do the pharmaceutical companies love you, Lenny? Are they sending you boxes of flowers and chocolates every day?
Well, I don't prescribe medication, and but I have heard from other doctors that they do get a lot of representatives coming to visit them to push the latest med. And this is something that's very new in our culture, new in terms of, back in the 60s, we weren't really seeing as much of this stuff. You start getting into like 70s, late 70s, 80s, you start to see this big push from companies saying, hey, how can we make more money off of this stuff? How can we make more money off of these drugs? And so that's why we're starting to see the advertisements on TV, and these have been around since like the 90s. But if you really take a close look at some of these medications, antipsychotics, and I'm just going to stick with that one, they used to be reserved for like the most severe patients, for the people who were like truly, there was no other alternative but to use medication. They used to reserve antipsychotics for that. It was not uncommon, starting in the late 90s, early 2000s, for antipsychotics to be a TV commercial as an additive for your depression medication. So now all of a sudden we're trying to put the average American on an antipsychotic, which we would have never done that in the past. And then, of course, now all of a sudden you've got people who can actually speak, and they're mild to moderately depressed. They're not severe schizophrenic, and they're able to say, hey, wait a second, I'm getting these movement disorders because of this. And now you've got this whole community of people who doesn't understand what's happening to them. Because this used to be something that, okay, very sadly, was just something that was a part of like very severe mental health. And, the poor people with severe mental health cannot speak up about this kind of stuff. We used to think medication-induced movement disorders were a side effect or were a part of the condition of schizophrenia. We didn't understand that, oh, it's the medicine we're using to treat it that's causing it.
Yeah, and the cocaine, which you've never had, you're the only one whose voice has ever been in Los Angeles who's not done cocaine, but you're on the East Coast in New York, so it's okay. You get a free pass.
Thank you.
But those in LA, they know a thing or two about twitching and moving around, and it's interesting to find out that this is really a direct cause of the medication. It's not something else. And once again, I sort of want to stress that your research, because you're a victim of this, of your own system, you didn't invent it, but you're a victim of your own system clinically. What you have uncovered and written about, your research, your white papers, your magazine articles are now the gold standard in America for this condition that was never observed before, probably because it was an inconvenient condition to observe and make public and make known. But you've got the cat out of the bag. And I think this helps listeners to be able to navigate the thousands of medications they're thrown at without much instruction. And maybe some of them are dealing with a lot of this stuff. We're talking to Lenny Gallo. He is the author of Unstill. His essays and articles have been published in journals and trade magazines. He's a certified specialist in the treatment of OCD, of trauma, anxiety disorders. And we're looking at his new book, Unstill, The Ordeal of Anxiety, of Pills, and an Undiagnosed Disorder, about a condition he developed as a side effect of prescription medications. So, Lenny, the next sort of obvious question to ask you once again being in the center of all of this, given what you now know, you're managing your own patients in a new way. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So typically therapists, we don't talk about medication too much. We leave that up to doctor or the prescribers, I should say. And now, since this isn't something that a lot of people recognize, I have been much more attuned to some of this stuff. I can't tell you how many people I have worked with who are showing signs of a movement disorder, being on certain medications. And it's just that little extra touch of being able to recognize this stuff that can save people years and years of their life. Because when I'm able to recognize this stuff in people, I've got a chance to then talk to their psychiatrist, talk to their prescriber, and to be able to say, hey, something's going on here. Maybe the meds need to be revisited. And if you tell a psychiatrist now, I suspect tardive dyskinesia, I suspect akathisia, they're like, whoa, because they know that that's not something they want to deal with. They will re-examine those medications. And so I really try to advocate, and I know there's some great organizations out there that are also advocating for education, for doctors, for therapists, the frontline people who are working with people every day. If we can recognize this stuff, and this goes for nurses as well, we can start to recognize that, okay, we can readjust the medications, we can get people off of medications that aren't working for them, and we can better help them, live a more normal life without having to destroy, bits and pieces of it.
We're, when I say we, I would say most people have a therapist. Most people that I know that are high functioning have a therapist. Now, I could see back in the 60s, you went and had an analyst. You had a therapist because you were nuts or you thought you were nuts. We now go to stay unnuts. We go to stay sane. That's why we go to therapists. How do I become the best version of myself? How do I understand all of this? And you're in that world. One of the absolutes that I was always told is that therapists have to remain completely opaque and invisible. I can't know where they live. I don't know anything about them. Do they like, pizza with weird anchovies upside down, cooked in a microwave and then seared in, lard? I know nothing about them, except I know what they look like. You're out. You're a therapist where your patients have now learned parts about you. It's in a book. Most therapists would want to keep that under wraps. Why did you choose to share your story with the world?
So, writing a memoir, if people had told me before I started this process what was going to be entailed in this, I probably would have never done it. But I have to say, it was such an inspiring, it was such a helpful journey for myself. And, one of the things I teach my patients is to be their authentic self and to live their more authentic, genuine version of their lives. And I don't know how I can honestly teach people to do that if I can't do that myself. This is a story that I hope will resonate with so many people and just get them to think a little bit more. And if it means putting myself out there in a way that's vulnerable, I've always done that on some level as an artist, as a writer. I think it's just we're human beings at the end of the day, and I'm teaching other human beings how to be their most genuine self as a human being. And so I felt it was appropriate that at this time in my life, I'm going to share this with the world, and I'm going to share this with patients. And if they don't like me, then I'm sorry. And I'm probably not the therapist for you.
I think they do like you, because it's one thing if some guy has studied this and is just lecturing about it at a university, or maybe a therapist read an article somewhere and is saying, I think I read that blah, blah, blah. And then you have a guy, you are a clinician. It has actually happened to you. You are a first responder to your own condition, and you found a way to solve it, and you found a way to tell the people of Earth about it who could be dealing with this and have an opportunity to avoid it. Let's finish with what advice or guidance, let's say, would you give the average person listening who's dealing with this potential issue or taking 5,000 medications? Because a lot of us have to.
So first and foremost, know the medications you're taking, know the names of them, research the side effects, ask yourself if the cost outweighs the benefit. And again, I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-vaccine. I want people to take medicines that help them. We need medicines, things of that nature. But you need to be your own patient advocate sometimes. You sometimes get 15 minutes with a doctor to tell them everything that's happened in your entire life. You get just a few minutes to kind of put it all out there. And I really hope people will continue to be their own patient advocate. If something feels wrong, if something isn't working, talk to your doctor. And if your doctor's not listening, don't be afraid to, find other doctors. Part of what helped me get through my journey was I didn't give up. I didn't stop when a doctor said, "Oh, we don't know what's going on," or "It might be this," or "It might be that." Part of what ultimately got me to closer to the finish line is being able to really, really, really be a patient advocate for myself. And I don't know if enough people do that or know how to do that. And, finally, I urge clinicians and anyone who is not familiar with any of the medication-induced movement disorders to please revisit that section of the DSM and educate yourself. There's CEU classes. There's plenty of organizations out there right now that will help people understand this. And there's plenty of things we can do as people to kind of, monitor this. And before you take a pill for your mental health, try therapy first. If it doesn't work, then you can start visiting medication. So those would be my things for people.
Well said. Lenny Gallo is author of Unstill. His essays and articles have been published in journals and trade magazines. He's a certified specialist in the treatment of OCD, of trauma, anxiety disorders, and we're discussing his new book, Unstill, Unstill, The Ordeal of Anxiety, Pills, and an Undiagnosed Disorder, about a condition. It's a memoir about a condition he developed as a side effect of prescription medications. Lenny, where can people find your book?
So you can go Amazon, Audible. There's an audio version for people who can't read it. And of course, you can visit my website, lennygallo.com/unstill for any book information there. And anywhere you buy books.
If people still read them. And
if they still read them.
They do. Thank God.
They do.
Yes.
They do.
Thank God. All right. Cary Harrison with you. A crisis brews in Washington. Inviting you again to watch the live video stream right now. You can go to just Google Cary Harrison, YouTube, Cary Harrison, Instagram, anything you want to use. You'll be able to watch the video of the live calls, your calls coming in. As we do look at this crisis brewing in Washington, we have unqualified and untested and unfit leaders helming our nation's vital agencies, former lobbyists regulating industries that they once exploited. Political operatives oversee life or death health decisions. Climate change deniers dismantle environmental safeguards. And your calls are going to be what makes this all interesting. I want you to jump on the phones right now and queue up 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735. That's 818-985-KPFK.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
We have taken over your radio. We are now in control. We can crank up your radio's volume, or we can turn it down so low that you can barely hear it. Then we can turn it back up and mess around with the bass level. Or we can crank up the treble. We can blow out your left speaker.
Oh my God.
We can even make your radio sound like a broken CD. We are in total charge. We are in complete control. We are
Rethinking Heroes.
No need for TV to win all the Emmys and recognition.
It's public radio standing up for the rest of us.
Ask yourself, who is really the friend of women and the LGBT and LGBT community? I will tell you who the better friend is, and someday I believe that will be proven out bigly.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
Our powerful Rolodex is a pantheon of progressive pundits and celebrities like Jane Fonda.
How do you stay active and not get too bummed and too depressed and stick your head in the sand and
because
go
I'm
away?
part of movements and I see people changing around me all the time.
Senator Sanders, it's no secret that millions of people love and adore you.
What is important right now is to focus on the enormous problems facing the country.
Rob Reiner.
Nixon talks about having seen an episode of All in the Family.
What an honor.
I know, it's an honor to be trashed by Nixon.
Frangela.
Frangela are two Negro Nightly newscastresses or castrators, whatever. Something, whatever it is.
Nice.
Rachel Maddow.
I'm not giving up. I'm not the world's most hopeful person, but what hope I have, I'm not giving up.
So maybe it's time for us to agitate a little bit more.
And the President of the United States of America.
Big league.
Big league.
Big league.
Big league.
Big league.
Big league. Big league.
Big.
I'm the place to guy.
Making radio great again. Hundreds of community and college stations now have a mothership for young voices and talent to carry the future.
Alonzo Hunt, 18 years old.
Even if they as individuals might or might not be good people, it really speaks to the ways that no matter what, they're really complicit in this system of white supremacist, heteronormative, patriarchal capitalism.
Our lines reach out to a rich tapestry of colorful and informed listeners.
You and federal government and media in general tend to assign cultural quality to anything that's that's deviant or beyond the bounds of nature.
Like you, sir. Green tooth, cannibal chewing, reactionary, neo-Nazi, jackbooted fascist.
That's what I mean, man.
Exactly. So I'm glad we agree on that point.
This pussy grabs back. Rethinking Heroes.
I'd ask whether or not you think I will someday be on Mount Rushmore.
Oh my God.
Right-click, delete. Preventing truth decay.
Truth Decay.
In a world of political constipation,
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
is a good movement. Preventing truth decay.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, rethinkingheroes.com. Don't forget, you can sign up for our free newsletter and get a copy of this and every other show. Plus, you'll get transcripts of what's going on and some articles that we simply cannot do on the radio, but we do for you. Some behind-the-scenes stuff, some investigative stuff, all kinds of cool things, all for our favorite price, free. That's at rethinkingheroes.com. Plus, we're also live streaming video right now on YouTube, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, anything with a chip and a signal. Just Google Cary Harrison and the streaming platform of your choice. Well, time to take your calls. And Washington, beware. Crisis looms. Unqualified leaders have grasped the reins of power. Former lobbyists now regulate their former playgrounds. You know, the word unethical barely touches it. Political insiders are going to be dictating life and death healthcare choices. Climate skeptics will be dismantling environmental protections. They've just said so. So I want you to envision the future. This is Margaret Atwood on steroids, okay? Industrial sympathizers jeopardizing food and water security. Financial guardians asleep, allowing Wall Street predators to ravage Main Street. Education dismantled, abandoning future generations. Science muzzled by ideology and superstition. This isn't leadership. This is reckless negligence. Our republic now trembles. And if you think you're alone in what you're seeing and feeling, you're not. There are around 200 million people here in the U.S. that are standing right beside you. And most of Europe has broken into a cold sweat too. Here's a video sent by a listener that encapsulates the current political situation so brilliantly, and I almost think we should bring her on as a weekly political commentary. Who better than a black woman to analyze the entanglements of gerrymandering, racism, sexism, misogyny, and hitting the Constitution with a flamethrower held by none other than Matt Gaetz, or Gates.
I might get some violations and I may offend some people with what I'm going to say, and I don't give a f***. To all you Latinos that voted for Trump, I hope he mass deports you and your entire family. Whether you were here legally or not, you gotta go. I hope he does that. To you black men who your fragile ego couldn't take a black woman in office, so you either voted for Trump or you didn't vote at all, the police will now have carte blanche to murder you right where the f*** you stand. And when they do that, there's not going to be no GoFundMes. Don't ask your family to ask us for just die. They can't afford to bury you. Dig a hole in their backyard. It is what the it is. But don't expect sympathy. Don't expect protest in the streets. We're not doing that. Black women, we're done with. We're done. We did our due diligence for this century and the next. We've done enough. We're not doing anymore. To you white women that once again voted against your fucking interests, when your husbands start knocking you into the middle of fucking next week and you can't do anything about it because no fault divorce is in play, I want you to take those black eyes and those busted lips as a personal thank you from Donald J. Trump each and every time you get fucking hit. Take it. Don't look for nobody else. Don't ask for fucking help. Take your beatings. For all of y'all that voted for Trump, I hope you get exactly what you voted for. Because the only thing he did was make America great for the people that it was great for from the f***ing beginning, white men. That's what he did. He couldn't run the risk of whiteness no longer being the default, not being allowed to fail up. So when you're bleeding out somewhere and there's a medical emergency and you can't get no
Just beautiful. She ought to be the weekly commentator. It takes a perspective different from the usual, someone with a different set of eyes. Bobby Kennedy's deep misunderstanding of health sciences has alarmed experts, right? The prospect of him controlling health and human services and his agencies. Talk about sparking fear among government health employees. These would be experts, actual medical doctors. He's demonized vaccines. That means we can expect a beautiful resurgence of maybe polio and tuberculosis. Won't that be fun on schoolyards? Because he says it causes autism, food allergies, and chronic illnesses. Maybe to some degree, but maybe not. He blames mass shootings on antidepressants. Really? He questions whether HIV causes AIDS. Well, let's get rid of HIV medication, shall we? And see what kind of fun sweeps through the populations of urban areas again. He says chemicals in the water supply have led more minors to identify as transgender. Of course, a glass of city water will make anyone sacrifice their genitalia and become a whole different human being. As my grandmother would say, maybe 100 years ago, I think it's in the water. He believes that. He claims that COVID is ethnically targeted in a way that gives Jewish and Chinese people greater immunity to the disease. You want him controlling your Social Security and your Medicare. You want him deciding everything about how the cells work in your body. And our previous guest, Lenny Gallo, well, good luck to that. These are real times that we all have to worry about. Let's go to, let's see. Wow, there's a million calls here. Let's go to Lenny. Actually, let's bring on Lenny back. We have a couple of calls for him. Lenny, you're back. Let's go to Michelle in Long Beach. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hello, how are you?
Doing great, thanks.
I was calling because I have an 8-year-old who's been seeing a therapist for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Was initially diagnosed with ADHD by this therapist that was rejected by another. So we never started any medication because we never accepted that. Then now it's pathological demand avoidance that is being suggested, and recommendations to take Zoloft and a list of about 5 other medications if the Zoloft doesn't work. We do not want to do that to an 8-year-old. So we did read something about magnesium being a natural treatment. So we did start that on our own. But because of your background, I just wanted to hear some sort of feedback about that.
Okay. Well, when it comes to putting kids on medication, it can be a very this can be a really hard one, especially for parents, especially for any sort of adults who have to, think about medicating their children. Generally speaking, you want to try an all natural approach as best as possible first. And hopefully you have a really good doctor working with you to guide you through this one. The thing with medication specifically is you want to start slow, okay? Because if I'm hearing 5 different medications, like my jaw just drops. Like, I hope that's not all going in at once.
No, it's if this doesn't work, we'll try this. If that doesn't work, we'll try this.
And this is where you have to weigh out sort of the cost benefits of this kind of stuff. I would say that, from my own personal experience with kids and medication, they generally don't like it and they generally don't want to stay on it. However, again, I want to make sure that not all medication is bad. It just has to be really closely monitored, and it really needs to be, especially specifically with kids, we really need to have good dialogue with the kids so that they can help us understand what's going on inside their body when they're put on medication. I'm personally not a fan of it, but that's me. But I also understand that some children do need to occasionally take a little something. The doses are very, very minute for children, but uh, make sure you're working with a good doctor who's willing to take any sort of phone calls, questions you have, any sort of, if there's any sort of questions you have, or if you're noticing anything unusual, if you notice any sorts of stuff going on with the changes in moods, changes in behavior, um, you want to be able to kind of run that stuff by a doctor. Um, and for ADD, I would try. I'm still a fan of talk therapy for ADD. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Thank you. And you're saying a pediatrician at least needs to be involved in the process.
Pediatrician should definitely be involved, and I would actually find a really good child psychiatrist who specializes because child psychiatrists are going to have a lot more knowledge of this stuff, and you want to make sure that you can call them at any hour of the day when you're working with kids if there are some side effects that come up that are unwanted.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hope that helps. Normally, this is somewhat unusual, keeping you on to answer questions, but I think it's great that you can actually offer some guidance to people who are absolutely clueless. Their doctors won't mention it. I had a doctor here in LA at Kaiser, a wonderful doctor, who sent me to one of the shrinks within the system who wanted to put me on an antipsychotic to help me sleep. And just the sound of an antipsychotic to help me sleep indicated that I was psychotic. And I asked him, am I psychotic? No. Then why are you giving me an antipsychotic? Because the side effect helps you sleep. But what about what it really does? Like the core mission of that antipsychotic. Are we going to deal? What happens? Oh, don't worry about it. So I didn't take it. There you go. I think we have one more to ask you a question.
Sure.
And I'm not sure who that is. I've got like 100 calls sitting here on the board. Who is that? Can you put them up, Gary, please? I think it's Melva. Melva, you're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just got to putting gas in the car. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your program, but especially this morning because my son is now 33 years old, and he didn't get diagnosed without the school telling us until he was in the first grade. In other words, they ran the test on him and did not inform us as parents. So we had to make a claim against the, San Francisco Board of Education. Nonetheless, my son's 33, and he just basically started taking this medication. It's been over a couple of years now. And as a child, he did not... he went through molestation. So there was a lot of things going on. Nonetheless, he's taking the medication. He's taking that Cymbalta, and he's putting on weight. And I haven't been able to talk to him to find out what other side effects he's having. I've read about it, and he functions really well in that he stays very well focused. He's a very talented young man, articulate. But since you mentioned this mobility type of disorder, it's something now that I need to question, but I guess I was trying to figure out how to go about it because, sometimes people are a little defensive because you're speaking about something that really bothers them in the first place,
Sure.
And he was fortunate, I'll say this, fortunate to have a clinician who is now retiring that never talked about drugs until they came in with some other information from the doctor, and then he had to change doctors. So, anyway, he's on that Cymbalta.
Okay.
And I don't... It
Okay.
keeps him from getting angry. Is that it? I don't know.
Yes, they can certainly do that. They can that can certainly do that. So, if your son has been on a medication long standing and there's no problems, we usually don't see medication-induced movement disorders that happen for people who have been on it for, like, if they're doing well on it, we don't usually see the medication-induced movement disorder kind of come up. Normally, these things would pop up much sooner, or they would pop up during changes of doses. So, if he's been able to stay on it, weight gain, unfortunately, is one of the big side effects for antidepressants of any kind. And so, what ends up happening is a lot of people don't usually like staying on antidepressants because of the weight gain that happens. But if he's doing okay on the medication, that's not one of the pills that's typically associated with medication-induced movement disorders.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
okay. That's actually I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that because I pay attention, and I'm glad he has a. This is funny. He has a new girlfriend, but she's into health, just health, generally diet and everything. And so I'm glad she's kind of mirroring what I believe in. You know, good health is your good diet, and you know, a lot of the stuff that they put in food. Okay. I feel better about that.
You know, if he's been on the medication for long term and there's been no problems, because normally what we'll start to see is we'll start to see movements happening while a person is on a medication, and that kind of gives us an indication that there is some sort of medication-induced movement disorder. But if he's doing fine on it and weight gain is not a problem for him, then that can be tolerable and acceptable. Like I said earlier, we do have to sometimes weigh the cost and benefits of these things, and only the individual can do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your call, Melba.
Thank you. And I think your book is worth having in my library. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Lenny, thank you so much for hanging in. We're going to finish up, I believe, with a little political conversation. But why don't you hang out in the background, if you don't mind terribly, in case somebody else has a question. We are floating the idea of what you think of HHS, Bobby Kennedy taking over all your medicine, a guy who feels that all vaccines are bad. That would bring back a giant world of polio, tuberculosis, all sorts of things that we haven't seen in the United States. FDR had polio, of course. We know that. He was in a wheelchair. He wasn't photographed much that way, but it has crippled, continues to, around the world, bringing all of this stuff back because of some ooga booga, because of a personal problem one has with mercury, understandably so, from eating a lot of game fish and tuna, getting dysphonia in your voice. But that doesn't mean that everyone should not be allowed to be vaccinated, especially children. I think I had measles and mumps, but there probably are people who no longer have to have measles and mumps, and good for them. So it's a complicated thing. Let's jump over to G in Glendale. You're on Rethinking Heroes. Welcome. Hello, G.
How are you? Third time caller. I've been trying to call for weeks, but I've been knocked out either asleep or I've been on the outside shopping trying to make it back when you and Carlos had your little tat-a-tat-tat. That was great radio and great life things. I thought he was gonna tear you up, which he usually does, tears everybody up, but you really were honest and you talked about paperclip and all that. Shot goes out to the doctor. Jersey represent. Passaic, New Jersey, Verona, where the doctor is. Great. I was going to comment that you should have your guests open up the phone lines to the callers, but you did. That was a great move. I'll let other people get on. I just wanted to run one or two things by you, Mr. Harrison. Damn, I forgot what it was. I got a suggestion for a guest. Hopefully, I'll run it by you next week. But you teased before you got your show. You teased it on your show, but before you got your show on your boy on IMRU, Michael Taylor Gray, you teased a few times about that. You're going to tell us a story about George Washington. So hopefully, you will one of these days.
I will.
Let other people come on. Thank you.
I promise. Thank you so much. He's referring to a once a month show I do on Monday nights at 7 p.m. during IMRU. It's a special presentation. It's called Unzipped. And I really get into the heart and soul of what happens when the lights go out. What do we as humans do? And what does it all mean? It's really fun. Totally different side of what I get to do. I get to play. It's cool. And I hope you'll join that too. We've just got a number of minutes left. Let's go to Mike in LA. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Cary, I'm a mess in Washington. What do you expect when you hire an alligator to drain a swamp?
Well, at least the alligator knows a swamp when it sees it and is generally comfortable in it. Wouldn't you agree?
That seems to be the case. But really, it takes me off all these lies they tell about the immigrants eating pets in Springfield. Everybody knows it's Shelbyville. They've been doing it there for years.
They're eating the dogs, people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
So there it is. What more could you possibly say? Thank you so much for your call. You're absolutely right. Einstein said it himself. You cannot fix the problem with the mind that created it to begin with. And we all know this is grifting. This is a giant bank robbery like we have never seen before, with trillions of dollars, surrounding yourself with the most corrupt, incompetent people to take down the very agencies that they are charged to control. Let's go to... Actually, we have another question for Lenny. Carlos, I love you. You have a question for Lenny, too. Let's see if we can squeeze in both. EJ, you're first. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Yes, hi. This is EJ. My question is for Lenny. Hi, Lenny.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you. When you were speaking earlier about your symptoms, about the tremors, the chewing and the hand movement, like playing the piano. My mom is now 83, but in her 60s, she had anxiety and she went to psychiatry and she went for talk and they prescribed her medication, Paxil, Klonopin. And I'm seeing some of those symptoms that you mentioned that she's exhibiting now and was exhibiting when she was taking those medications. Is there anything that can be done about that?
So, generally speaking, and this would have to be diagnosed by a neurologist. Is she seen a neurologist?
She has one.
Okay.
So she goes to UCLA for the geriatric care.
Okay. So neurologists will generally be the best people to help. Diagnose a lot of this stuff because they can differentiate between other sorts of tremors that go on in the body. So I want to make sure there's a distinction. Like there are movements disorders and things that happen non-medication related. If things did start because of medication, a good movement specialist, and movement specialists are doctors that specifically specialize in movements. They're neurologists who will specialize in that. They can then better determine based on history if medications played a part in movement disorders. Because yes, we can see for some people years after the medicine has been removed, we can see movement disorders develop. So there's the term tardive akathisia, tardive dyskinesia. That basically means delayed in onset. Delayed meaning it happens after the fact, after the removal of something. So it's worth following up with a neurologist, and it's worth following up with a movement specialist who will be a more specialized version of a neurologist.
Okay, thank you. And it's also affecting her ability to walk. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. A movement specialist. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing your story.
You're very welcome. Well, it looks like we are up against the clock. I appreciate you hanging in there, Lenny. We were going to go on a long and hideous Alice in Wonderland style rabbit hole down the dystopic hell of the future as we believe it's going to be. Yes. But actually, this was a soothing emollient to people's day-to-day living. And you know what? If they don't have to deal with that stuff, they're going to be more able to fight a future that they cannot fully understand. So I appreciate you coming on. Let me give you some love again and explain who you are if you've just joined us. We've been talking to Lenny Gallo, author of Unstill. His essays and articles have been published in journals and trade magazines. He's a certified specialist in the treatment of OCD, of trauma and anxiety disorders. And we're discussing the new book, Unstill, The Ordeal of Anxiety, of Pills, and an Undiagnosed Disorder about a condition he developed himself as a side effect of prescription medications. He, a clinician willing to talk about it. You are a hero, my friend, and this is Rethinking Heroes. If you get our free newsletter at rethinkingheroes.com, I think we'll make a couple of copies for free available there. First couple of people that ask for it, I know Lenny will be very happy to provide them. And anything we could do to help your life get better, that's what we are here to do. Don't forget, we're also live streaming on all video, everything with a chip and a signal. You can see an archive of this on KPFK's Facebook page, along with my YouTube page. Just Google Cary Harrison and then fill in the blank of whatever streaming platform you like. And there it is. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
We are in complete control. We are Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.